This video is brought to you by my wonderful patrons and subscribers on Patreon and Subscribestar. These wonderful people are Jack Whitchurch, Master Stew over at Patreon. If you would like to see even more videos in the future and allow me to do this full time, please do consider donating to one of these services of your choice. Now on with the video. Silicon Valley has had a very turbulent decade as the culture war between cultural Marxist totalitarianism and its many different strands versus anti-SJWs flared up and escalated in the years since Gamergate. From an area that housed the biggest and most important STEM companies that at least pre-culture war only seemed to want to create newer and better technologies and jobs and make money. They seemed like any other industry at the time until things began to change slowly and then later rapidly over time. Tech giants like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Apple began to change their outlook on what tech companies, especially those with an extremely important online presence, should do. Gone were the ideas that they were simply creating utilities for the public to use and for them to profit off, and in were the ideas that they somehow had social responsibilities to police the internet and society at large. Gone were the mantras like Google's "don't be evil," and in was getting woke and progressive, though one can argue that perhaps it was government pressure that was exerted on these companies that made them change these stances. One only needs to look at the comments made by their lowest employees all the way up to the CEOs themselves to see how bad this authoritarian cultural Marxist attitude has infested Silicon Valley. We saw the warning signs during Gamergate when even sites like 4chan were censoring discussion alongside sites like Reddit and the games press. Not only that, the Games Are Dead articles released raised questions of possible press collusion. The era of Ellen, Chairman Powell at Reddit was another warning sign, her temporary reign resulting in some of the most blanket censorship the site has ever seen. Then we saw the Google memo written by James Damore and the subsequent fallout from that as he exposed just how corrupt and poisoned Google was, to the point that they were potentially breaking employment regulations just to be progressive. Not only that, Mark Zuckerberg was hauled into Congress to explain Facebook's privacy violations, selling people's personal data to companies and most notably the Chinese. Now why is it that in a video called the Silicon Valley Cartel have I spent all this time going back through time talking about censorship and the changing attitudes of the Silicon Valley tech giants? Well, you see, it all culminated in the censorship of Alex Jones last year. On the pretense of him allegedly saying racist, homophobic things and comments made about the Sandy Hook shooting, Silicon Valley decided to unperson Alex Jones. One after another, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, Apple, all banned or removed Jones from their platforms based on these spurious allegations. Even with him being sued by the victims of Sandy Hook, this was a very questionable reason to ban him, who has been banned by all major websites for potentially not even being proven to be libeling someone. The fact that all these companies banned him one after the other, day after day, quickly raised concerns of corporate collusion. For you see, these are companies, Instagram is owned by Facebook and YouTube by Google, and meant to be in competition with each other in a marketplace. Yet what we could potentially be seeing here is collusion to ban and unperson people who they consider to be ideologically threatening to their ideologies and their governments. Then, after Alex Jones, Tommy Robinson also received the same unpersoning treatment by Silicon Valley, again under spurious allegations of hate speech and racism, further raising questions about collusion and a potential cartel that has been formed by these companies. In fact, a much smaller but no less important event, the banning of Sargon of Akkad from Patreon, raised so many questions that the YouTuber Law reported Patreon and PayPal to the FCC, accusing them of collusion. These financial tech companies alongside MasterCard have also been involved in other events where collusion has been levelled at them. So if this cartel is real, which on current evidence suggests that it is incredibly likely to exist, why is it a cartel? What could the goals and aims be of this cartel, and what even is a cartel? This video is going to try and come up with a thesis as to why this is the case, and if there are any solutions to this problem. So first, what is a cartel? Thomas Sowell in Basic Economics gives the basic definition of cartels. Where there is formal organisation in an industry to set prices and output, a cartel, its results can also be somewhat like those of a monopoly, even though there may be numerous sellers in the cartel. Now, I do concede, in terms of setting prices and output, there is not much beyond the banning of certain apps like Gab and Dissenter, as well as individuals, businesses and products in Silicon Valley web stores. And as far as we know, the tech giants are not known to have set prices and seem to be operating well within the rules. But within this framework, the basic framework of a group of companies working together for a common goal, I think we can say for certain that the behaviour we have seen from Silicon Valley tech giants could constitute a cartel. So although they do not meet the classical definition of a cartel, they do meet it in some aspect, and despite a lot of people's rhetoric online, I would not go far to say the whole of Silicon Valley is a monopoly, or even the individual companies that are massive, like YouTube are. They still have competition, even if the competition is non-competition at best, or stifled at worst. BitChute exists, one can always go over there if they're fed up with YouTube. So what are these companies' goals and aims in this cartel? All companies do exist to make money. If they do not make money, they do not survive the free market. Even someone who has never read an economics book can tell you that. It's common sense. However, monetary profit is not the be-all, end-all of a given company's goal or even margin. Yes, the money is indeed important, but there are more types of profit than just monetary, believe it or not. Indeed, there is such a thing called psychic profit. Murray Rothbard gives us an excellent description of this type of profit. The fourth, and by far the least fundamental postulate for a theory of the market, is the one which Professors Hutchison and MacLuck consider crucial, that firms always aim at maximisation of their money profits. As will become clearer when I treat the fundamental axiom below, this assumption is by no means a necessary part of economic theory. From our axiom is derived this absolute truth, that every firm aims always at maximising its psychic profit. This may or may not involve maximising its money profit. Often it may not, and no praxeologist would deny this fact. When an entrepreneur deliberately accepts lower money profits in order to give a good job to a ne'er-do-well nephew, praxeologist is not confounded. The entrepreneur simply has chosen to take a certain cut in monetary profit in order to satisfy his consumption satisfaction of seeing his nephew well provided. The assumption that firms aim at maximising their money profits is simply a convenience of analysis. It permits the elaboration of a framework of catalactics, economics of the market, which could not otherwise be developed. The praxeologist always has in mind the proviso that where this subsidiary postulate does not apply, as in the case of the ne'er-do-well, his deduced theories will not be applicable. He simply believes that enough entrepreneurs follow monetary aims enough of the time to make his theory highly useful in explaining the real market. To put it like this, people run corporations, just like you and me, who do not always act rationally or in the interests of monetary profit. Sometimes we just want to feel good about something and feel mentally better, hence the term psychic profit. It is why you see companies like Ben & Jerry's, Gillette, Pepsi engage in social issues in order to sell their products. Sometimes it makes big monetary profit, sometimes it does not. The monetary profit comes second to the psychic profit because these companies can show to the world how progressive and inclusive they are. And it is my belief that if this Silicon Valley cartel does exist, therefore they are engaging in censorship and getting involved in political and social issues. Sure, it can benefit them that competition like Gab, BitChute, etc. can be removed, but if these companies toed the cartel's political line and banned dissenting voices from their platforms, the Silicon Valley giants would not have an issue. Why do you think that Patreon banned Sargon and others from the platform? Because at some point, they received a lot of financial backing from far-left political activists within Silicon Valley. Potentially. Or they were browbeaten by the cartel, of whom they were already sympathetic with anyway, and had to ban Sargon and Lauren Southern for those reasons. They either wanted in on the cartel to be a part of the big politically correct and progressive big boys like PayPal and Google, or they were forced to do it due to funding, or just did it because they disliked dissident voices. Regardless of their reasons, it makes them feel good. It gives all these progressive tech companies a psychic profit, and the monetary loss of profit does not even factor into it. In fact, a lot of these companies are so large, so important to the market economy, even our lives, that one could argue that they're in a post-profit situation. YouTube does not need to make a profit because Daddy Google makes so much money that they can run the company at a loss for as long as Google remains in business, which is probably going to be for the foreseeable future. So psychic profit is but one dimension for them taking up this moral arbiter role that they clearly are not well suited for. There's also the matter of survival. Unfortunately for these tech giants, governments and other industries, for example old media like the BBC, Fox News, NBC and CNN have a vested interest in gaining control over the internet. We all know the reasons why, but for those who do not, I'll try to give you a short list. Destruction of the alt media, which is competition for the old media, who are incapable of competing in the free market, control the narrative, control the public thought and opinion, and the suppression of dissident or subversive elements within society. That is a very basic rundown of why these groups would be interested in aligning themselves with the Silicon Valley cartel, or trying to force them into this action. As we've seen, the media has been very good at forcing YouTube to submit and bend the knee because they are terrified of the bad PR that looking racist or sexist can bring not just to an individual but to a company. It is why the adpocalypse happened, and eventually why they signed a deal to promote the old media institutions on YouTube. Simple survival. The old media still has the power to destroy any reputation and are practically a cartel themselves, and government have the full weight of the state apparatus to crush these companies. All it takes is one report or one law, one intervention, and they are all over. Just lucky for these Silicon Valley giants that they all have similar goals and ideals. So there are my reasons why I believe this cartel could exist and why they are doing this. So how do we go about fixing this problem? If we finally do have empirical evidence, if after YouTuber Law's lawsuit does win and the FCC investigate PayPal and Patreon for collusion, this cartel is proven to exist. How do we break it up? Well, there's already one solution that I kind of alluded to when I mentioned YouTuber Law's lawsuit. We can lobby the government or report to the government agencies of our respective countries that deal with fair trade practices to investigate and punish these companies. The full weight of the state is enough, as I mentioned, to crush cartels and monopolies. That is why governments make laws against them and break them up and punish the law-breaking companies. Unfortunately, governments can take years in order to build up a case to prosecute these companies. Also, since there is some evidence that governments and politicians are working with this cartel, it could jeopardise any legal action. However, organisations like the FCC, though a federal agency, has a large amount of independence from the United States government, so can be trusted to some extent. It may be the most powerful option, but the slowest and most costly with no guarantee of victory. Even if, in a lot of monopoly and cartel cases, like against Microsoft in the early 2000s, even if the practice cannot be truly proven, the accused usually are found guilty because the government only needs to make a superficial prima facie case. The fastest way is simply for there to be more companies in the market to provide competition. However, since this is not about monetary profit, but psychic profit, where the ammunition used is not who can provide the cheapest prices, but who can make the best argument for the chosen ideology, it is a little more complicated. But, as Sowell does point out many times in his book, monopolies like many railroads were in the 1800s in the US, or the Aluminium Company of America in the early 20th century. Often, new technologies or companies able to offer a better deal to customers will usually break up these monopolies and cartels quicker than the government can bring a case against them. In the case of cartels, Sowell says, in theory, a cartel could operate collectively the same as a monopoly. In practice, however, individual members of cartels tend to cheat on one another secretly, lowering the cartel price to some customers in order to take business away from other members of the cartel. When this practice becomes widespread, the cartel becomes irrelevant, whether or not it formally ceases to exist. Due to the nature of competition in market economics and human action and behaviour, these companies, at least when monetary profit is more important to them, will try to undercut each other to make more money. But if this cartel is not necessarily based on monetary profit, but on psychic profit, then how do they stop themselves from trying to undermine each other as SJWs are wont to do? Infighting is one of the far less favourite pastimes. Sowell then says there have been some cartels that did not end up destroying themselves through backstabbing, and he says one of the most successful cartels, that in the American steel industry, was based on the pricing system made it easy for the companies to check up on one another, but that system was eventually outlawed by the courts under the antitrust laws. This was a system where all steel prices in the United States were based on the fixed price of steel plus the cost of shipping it by rail from Pittsburgh, regardless of whether the steel was actually produced in Pittsburgh, Birmingham, or anywhere else, and regardless of whether it was shipped by rail, barge, or by other means. Otherwise, it would be easy for individual steel producers to hide price reductions in the large and variable freight charges for shipping a heavy product like steel from different places by different modes of transportation, making it far more difficult to tell who was undercutting the price agreed to by the cartel. But under the cartel's pricing system, it was easy to tell what the total delivered cost of steel, price plus rail shipment cost from Pittsburgh, should be at any point in the country, regardless where it was produced or how it was shipped. Well, considering that they all live in the same area, may even come from the same area, and often similar backgrounds, it's not a stretch to imagine that often they agree with each other because these factors end up making them have similar beliefs. Solidarity, basically. Also, the purity spiral and the danger of becoming pariahs. We all saw what happened when companies like Subscribestar chose to not get with the program. PayPal and Patreon tried to destroy them. Whipping, as the practice is in UK politics, where the party is forced to vote, or in this case, believe a certain thing for the good of the cause. Unfortunately, the only recourse for us is to use the government, and even then, I'm not sure if this raises any First Amendment issues, free speech issues, for it is only a matter of ideology, not really profit, that are the reasons behind this collusion. Nonetheless, if collusion can be proved, hopefully it is the collusion they are punished for, not their beliefs. I guess the only way the market can successfully defeat a successful cartel as this would be if somehow alternative media and alternative tech are somehow able to become even bigger than these conglomerates. A big ask, and not something that is easy or likely to happen anytime soon. Another option entirely would be to create an alternative internet away from the system we currently have, something that government and corporations would find difficult to control. The only downsides are that this balkanization could be very hard to accomplish, and it keeps those of us in the social commentary side of things effectively out of the public eye. For if things get so bad that we cannot venture outside this alternative internet that will be maligned by old media and old tech, normies will ignore it because we're Nazis, and if we try to engage on the normal internet, we could get banned. But it is an option. Anyway, I've gone far enough. Links in the description for the books I used, and I recommend them. I also recommend these videos by Academic Agent, Short Fat Otaku, and YouTuber Law. See you later.